Mr. Hayes, who was the principal of our school, knew that the Four Freedoms were important, and it was important for us to know it, even if we were only 11 years of age. And it was grades 1 through 8, and we all came into the auditorium. We all filed in according to our grade. I'd see 41, that would have been 11 years old, so I would have been about grade 6 or 7, somewhere in there. And we all sat down in our rows. It was a big auditorium, but it was room for all of us. And there was a radio on the edge of the stage. And he said, "Now I want you to hear this speech by our president. There's a big war going on," and it looks like he was prefacing this whole thing, but it was important for us to hear it. And I've always remembered that it was so significant then for him to take something that was intangible to us. I mean, we're 11-year-old imagination. We're playing ball out back. We're not thinking about a war. He's bringing it home. And so we sat there, and I just remember recall the phrase about we were fighting for 4 freedoms. And then he goes on to expand on what each individual freedom meant to the United States. It's what we were all about.
The first is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understandings which will secure to every nation a healthy, peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. The fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide reduction of armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world.
The Freedom Train came into being through Washington, and it was a train that was made up of passenger cars that all the seats had been taken out. And within the body of those, I think 16 passenger cars, because they had a military group that traveled with the Freedom Train that guarded the train when it pulled into these various cities, 16, and then the troops gathered and protected the train while it was stationed. The train was not a typical train in the sense that it would pull into a station, let people off, then people would get on, and then it would leave 10 minutes later. It would stay maybe 4, 6, 8 weeks, maybe 3 months, depending on the population area where it was served. And it's served 16 different locations in the United States during its travels. And it would stay there. And you got to see what was on the train by buying a war bond. My recollection is that we were living in Coconut Grove, which is a suburb of Miami, but the Freedom Train did not come down to Florida, did not come down to Miami, because there was just no dense population down there. It came to Jacksonville, as I recall, and the way I got on the train was to buy a war bond. And it had to pay $18.75 to get a $25 war bond. Before we left, I didn't have enough money in my little savings bank to buy a war bond. I think I had $17.50. So my dad gave me another $1.25 in quarters, and I pasted the stamps in my stamp book. And then when I got to the train, then I gave them my little stamp book, and that's how I bought my $25 war bond. Then I got on the train, and then I saw them. Voila. And I saw Uncle Sam Wants You, and I saw some of those other famous paintings that were created. I don't remember them all, not nearly all of them, but they were created during World War I. And I was frozen just when I saw that. There was one of the four freedoms in each car. And then there were other paintings in other cars. One of the cars had accommodations for military people who were traveling with the train. I think all services were involved, and they stood guard at the train. The train stayed there. And then when they felt that they had soaked up all the war bond money from that community, then the train went to the next city. I think it took a long time, and it seems it might have been close to a year and a half. The comments I've heard, collectively speaking, they're so thoughtful, so profound, and something as simple as somebody getting up and speaking at a town meeting about an issue about which the details are in that little blue paper in his pocket. And he's getting up and making his point. But the listeners are all turned, and he's obviously making a very important point. That impacted me. In the freedom to worship, they're all facing the left. I love that work, being a religious person and thoughtful that way. That impacted me. Thanksgiving, I love Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday. My dad was born on Thanksgiving, so there's two connections right there. And then freedom from fear. And when I lived in Miami, we always had to close the lights on the east side of our houses in town because the German submarines were sinking ships off Miami Beach. So I was very sensitive to that as well. Our sense of duty and responsibility was becoming apparent as the war went on. When drives came along, a rubber drive, a metal drive. I can remember sitting in the living room of my house. My dad smoked Chesterfield cigarettes. I can remember peeling the silver metal off the wrapper that was inside the pack of Chesterfield cigarettes. They were all wrapped in foil. Then you had to separate the paper from it. Then you started out making a ball, and then you made it bigger and bigger and bigger. And we did that. You did that with gum, though they didn't sell too much gum once the war started because of gum, and it's because of what it was. And it's important in making rubber, making tires. So there wasn't too much in that way, but again, separating the paper from the foil and doing that. So we all did that. So they were all in their own way, and I think maybe they were even brought more to fruition because of having seen the Four Freedoms, having heard the speech about the Four Freedoms. All us kids were very patriotic and active in the war drives and the things that we did during the war.